Welcome to another podcast of the Patriotic Pulpit. I am Bill Lockwood. We've examined in the past the Roman Catholic Church. I've asserted that it is an apostasy from the New Testament, that it is not faithful to the New Testament, it is not faithful to Christianity at all, but really is, indeed, as Paul describes in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the man of sin. Many people have written in regarding past podcasts pertaining to Catholicism because we've done some reviews and we have not begun, really. We've just touched the hem of the garment of what Catholicism is in its teaching and its structure and the power of it. We've only begun. But today we're looking at the evolution of papal power, the evolution of the papacy. Now, I want to say, if you wish to write into the program, I'm happy for you to do so. I am not I don't, of course, I understand that everyone does not agree, and I am not, of course, I don't want to be hateful about it. I'm not trying to be unkind, unloving, but simply the truth needs to be spoken regarding the Roman Catholic Church. And so today we're looking at the evolution of papal power. And we're going to start with the early church, move through the Middle Ages, and finally, when we come to papal infallibility in 1870 by Pius IX. So we're going to look at some of this. We'll just do it in a thumbnail sketch, but some of it is rather shocking. And I find it difficult to understand how anyone could come to the papacy of the Roman Church and say, this is what the New Testament teaches. Look what's going on right now. Now, obviously, of course, Pope Francis is in the hospital, and he's not doing well, but he may recover. But I don't wish any ill upon the man. I don't wish any ill upon any Roman Catholic at all. I simply want them to learn the truth regarding it. And they are, of course, in apostasy from the New Testament. So we'll see that when we talk about the evolution of papal power. So we'll begin, first of all, with the early church. The earliest church knew nothing about popes, bishops, not in the sense in which they're used in the Roman Church, ecclesiastical dictatorships. The communities of the church in the New Testament were simply democratic, and they had rulers by elders in each congregation. That's Acts chapter 14, verse 23. In every congregation there were elders, plural, and always, by the way, a plurality of elders. There was no dictatorship of one-man pastor system. There was not a dictatorship of one elder or one bishop. The church grew more or less in a systematic manner for the first 3 centuries. Now, Peter was important, but so was Paul. And nobody knows exactly how important. The New Testament does not show that Peter was the Pope. It does not show, and matter of fact, early Christian history does not show that Peter necessarily was in Rome. We don't know if he was in Rome or not. Those are simply traditions that are fostered by the Roman Catholic Church. But what we need to note is that the New Testament church did not know anything about the hierarchy that we have now witnessing in the Roman Catholic Church. Not only so, but there was no, number one, primacy to the Roman Church. Now, primacy means that the Church of Rome is the prime church, and that is that church to which all the churches turn for answers. That was not the case in the early centuries. No one can read early centuries of Christianity and come away with the idea that the Roman Church had primacy over other churches. The first Christians knew nothing about the alleged primacy of the Roman bishops, and some of the first popes of the Roman Church were buried in the catacombs as simple bishops without any papal inscriptions on their tombs whatsoever. Now, I want to make clear this, that the word pope is not used in the early centuries to refer to the universal pope. That was something that came later, as we've noticed before, Boniface number 3. But the idea of the papacy and the papal power was really a development or developing idea. So let's note carefully this particular. This is from Paul Blanchard. Paul Blanchard said the idea that the Roman bishops should be made into popes developed slowly and gradually as a result of historical forces and population movements. That's exactly right. The idea that the Roman bishops made into popes developed slowly and gradually. The early church thought it needed some central authority to rule its quarreling factions and to mobilize the clergy for effective work, and so metropolitan Rome seemed a logical place for the seat of authority, but there's no evidence in the Bible or in early Christian literature that the structure of power that actually developed in the Roman Catholic Church ever had any necessary connection with Christianity at the beginning, or that the founders of the first churches contemplated anything like the papacy. There was simply no primacy of the Roman Church in the early centuries. The real founder of the primacy, that is, to put the Roman Church on the map as the prime church, was Constantine, which of course was in the 4th century. Constantine, the emperor of Rome, was baptized on his deathbed in 337 AD. And his conversion changed the future of the entire church. He admitted Christianity into an official, recognized status, an organized government religion in 313 AD. Now he did that, notice he put Christianity in as a recognized religion, so stopping all of the persecution that had been leveled against Christians in the early churches of Christ. So he stopped that in 313 by admitting Christianity as an official government organized religion. But it was not until Theodosius the Great in the 4th century who made Christianity the sole official religion of the empire. Now, what will happen if the government makes Christianity the sole government religion? That is the only religion to which one can be attached with government approval. What is obviously going to happen? What is going to happen is what did happen, and that is we have the union of church and state. That has become now one of the cardinal tenets of Catholic policy, and admitted into the church were reams and reams and masses of people who brought in all of the paganistic practices, paganistic ideas, and immoral practices. That's what happened. So now we have a church and state policy that begins with Theodosius the Great in the 4th century. Trading on the advantages of that policy, the church at Rome was gradually transformed from an informal association of believers into a great ecclesiastical empire. And later on, it became an important temporal power itself, that is, a secular power. And it acquired armies, navies, diplomats, considerable stretches of territory for several centuries. The Roman Church held sway over princes and kings, and for several other centuries, it was completely dominated by princes and kings. This is a fascinating history, but it is history that shows us that the Roman Church is actually an apostasy, a development that moved away from the New Testament. Now we come to Pope Gelasius I in the 5th century, 492 to 496 AD, when he reigned as Pope. Really, he was not the universal bishop, not the universal pope. We've already seen that was not until 606. But Pope Gelasius, number 1, invented the concept of 2 spheres of control, what was called the 2 swords. And that is, one spiritual, the other temporal. One the church, the other secular government. The world was divided into 2 different spheres, one controlled by the church and one controlled by civil power. That's the 5th century with Pope Gelasius. He laid this foundation. According to this theory, then, both the powers derive their authority from God himself. So we have religious authority on one hand, and then we have secular authority on the other hand. Then we have Pope Boniface number 3 in 606, the first universal pope. We talked about how that came about. This is from Roman Catholic history itself, how Pope Boniface number 3 actually became the first universal pope. Gregory the 7th. Now let's move to the 11th century, 1075 AD. Pope Gregory takes the 2 swords concept, secular power, ecclesiastical power, and says that the Pope has authority over the civic powers. He carried the claims of Gelasius further in 1075 by explicitly declaring that popes have a right to depose emperors. Now, what would we say if the Pope today said he has the power, and this is, of course, what they do say, but they don't say it out loud, that the Pope has the power to depose the President of the United States. That's exactly what Gregory VII said, that he had the right to depose secular power. In 1080, he gave a demonstration of it because he deposed Henry IV and absolved all of Henry's followers from their oath of allegiance to him on the ground that popes could bind and loosen the heavens so they could take away and grant kingdoms, principalities, and all other possessions of men according to men's merits. He claimed that the Pope stood to the emperor as the sun does to the moon. So, I can remove emperors, I can remove kings and presidents, so said Pope Gregory VII. How did that happen? Well, it took 1,000 years of apostasy away from the New Testament. No one reads anything like this in the New Testament, nothing at all. Why? Because it is absolutely an apostasy from the New Testament. Now let's move to Boniface number 8 in the 14th century. He was 1302 AD. He made a bold and presumptuous statement of papal dominion over the entire world. And it was called in Latin unum sanctum. That was in 1302. He claimed at the time of his jubilee in the year 1300 that he was both pope and emperor. He had both swords carried in front of himself in his official processions to symbolize the dual majesty. So the concept of two swords, remember that was mentioned by Pope Gelasius earlier. Now he says, and he has literal swords on him, symbolizing that he has authority over the secular power as well as ecclesiastical power. That's Boniface number 8. Absolutely stunning. So grave was the apostasy. He tells us the temporal is subject to the ecclesiastical or spiritual. Now note this, the papacy has never to this day renounced the symbolism of these two swords, since it still claims to be both a church and a state. That's why it is truly an un-American institution when we get down to it, and we'll talk about that in a later podcast. But the Roman Church never renounced its status as an important European temporal authority and military power until it was forced to do so by arms, and that would be, of course, in the 20th century. Now we move to 1570, Pope Pius number 5. He absolved subjects of Queen Elizabeth number 1 of England for persecuting Catholics. Now, let me just stop here and say this. We're just going back just a little bit, tracking backwards to show that the popes have claimed authority over not only ecclesiastical power, or they said they had ecclesiastical power, but have control over temporal or secular power. So Pope Pius number 5 absolved all subjects of Queen Elizabeth number 1 in England for persecuting Catholics. Now he said, persecuted Catholics, so he absolved the subjects of being in submission to her. He called on the people of England to disobey her orders. The bull was called Regnans in Excelsis. So he said, he that reigns on high, to whom is given all power in heaven and on earth, has committed the one holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church, out of which there is no salvation. By the way, let's just stop there and note something. Roman Catholicism teaches you have to be a Roman Catholic or you're not saved. This, of course, the Bible does not teach because the Bible does not know of the Roman Catholic Church. But he says, out of which there's no salvation. Continuing, to one alone on earth, namely to Peter, Prince of the Apostles, to the Roman Pontiff, successor of Peter, to be governed with a plenitude of power. This one he has constituted prince over all nations and all kingdoms, that he might pluck up, destroy, dissipate, ruinate, plant, and to build. And in the same bull he declares, he thereby deprived the queen of her pretended right to the kingdom, of all dominion, dignity, and privilege whatsoever, and absolves the nobles, subjects, and people of the kingdom, and whoever else have sworn to her from their oath and all duty whatsoever in regard of dominion, fidelity, and obedience. So says Pius number 5 in 1570. Stunning, isn't it, that the Roman Church, Pope, the papal power, dominion, declares that it has power over secular authority and really releases the subjects of a queen in England from obedience to her. How does that square with the Bible, which teaches, let every soul be in subject to the higher powers, for there's no power but of God, and the powers that be are ordained of God? Pius 5 says that is not so. They're not subject to her at all. I tell you that it is stunning, the audacity that the Roman Church and the popes have made. But that's just the beginning. Pope Clement VI deposed Emperor Louis IV of the Holy Roman Empire in 1346. He declared him a heretic and schismatic. He put pressure that caused Charles of Moravia to be elected in July 1346. And then Charles then, of course, became a puppet of Clement. Pope Clement V in the Great Synod of Vienna declared the emperor subject to him, obliged him to a proper oath of fealty. That is, he said, you're going to have to take an oath of fidelity to me. Pope Innocent III, 1198 to 1216, he affirmed the pontifical authority so much to exceed royal power as the sun did of the moon. We mentioned that a little bit ago. Pope Innocent IV, 1243 to 1254, he declared the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II his vassal, condemned him and deposed him, called for a crusade against Emperor Frederick II. And here's the quote. He absolved all who were held bound by an oath of allegiance, that no man regard him as emperor or king, and whoever shall hereafter yield advice or aid or favor him as an emperor or king shall immediately lie under the ban of excommunication. Who cannot see that the Roman Church is nothing less than a secular power with the garment of ecclesiastical robes? That's all that it is. It is a secular power, and it vies for power in the world today. It is a state. It is a secular state. And here the popes, acting as secular kings, absolving individuals from obedience to their king and obedience to the different emperors that were in power. That is, of course, audacious to say the least. But now let's see how the papal infallibility came about. From coronations and absolving subjects to submission to the kings, now we come to infallibility. Number one, Leo III, the ruler of the Papal States and Bishop of Rome from December 795 to June 816. This is really, we might call the height of papal power, Leo III. The popes conferred crowns on ruling monarchs of Europe. They did much to direct the policies of their governments. He crowned Charlemagne as emperor of the West, and other emperors kept coming to Rome for coronations. This occurred for 600 years. Even Napoleon Bonaparte planned at one time to be crowned in St. Peter's, but changed his mind because of a dispute he had with Pius VII. But it was the slow process of growth that was occurring and adaptation. The elaborate structure of the Vatican emerged slowly, and it gelled over a period of time. It became a papal dictatorship, frequently facing opposition, but nevertheless a dictatorship. By the way, sometimes this dictatorship used questionable means to assert its authority. For example, the infamous donation of Constantine. By the way, this is an infamous document, that is forged document, purporting to show that Constantine had given to the Pope all the provinces of the Western Roman Empire. It was composed in the 9th century, but the papacy used it for many centuries to assert its authority, but it was always a fabrication. It claimed political authority by the papacy, but this is a fabrication by the Pope of Rome. It included the pseudo-Isidorian decretals of the 9th century. It's interesting that Lorenzo Valla, a Roman Catholic priest, exposed the forgery in 1439 and 1440. But the Roman papacy used it, traded on this forgery, this forged document, the donation of Constantine, for many years, in order to assert its authority. How do you like that? that doesn't sound like New Testament Christianity. We don't even sound like we're in the same building with Christianity here, does it? The Pseudo-Isidorian decretals. Let's talk about those for just a moment. These were an extensive body of influential forgeries. Pseudo-Isidore's main object was to provide accused bishops with an array of legal protections amounting to de facto immunity from trial and conviction, to secure episcopal autonomy within the diocese, and to defend the integrity of church property. The decretals expanded the legal jurisdiction of the Bishop of Rome. So I'm asking this question here. Sometimes people write to the program and say, well, the Roman Catholic Church gave us the Bible. This is the Roman Church that gave us the Bible, that has traded for centuries on false, fabricated decretals? This is the church that supposedly gives us the Bible? I'm ashamed that people would think such. The Roman Catholic Church did not give us the Bible. The Roman Church tried to bury the Bible. It did kill people who tried to publish the Bible. The Roman Church has been the antagonist of the Bible for many, many centuries. The final totalitarian structure, however, of the Roman Church was not perfected until the corruption of the Middle Ages had produced the Reformation, and that Reformation in turn produced the Counter-Reformation within the Roman Church. It was here that the Roman Catholic Church took on a more centralized type of authority. So while the rest of the world was busy with the expansion of modern liberalism and science, the papacy, under the influence of the Jesuits, there's another program we'll do in a future podcast, tightened its grip on every branch of the church and stood against the tides of modern culture. Throughout the world, the Jesuits, that would be a Roman Catholic organization, acted as promoters and intelligence agents of papal absolutism, reporting to the Pope on any movement among the clergy that might weaken his authority. And gradually, more and more centralized power came into the hands of the papacy until the climax in 1870, when Pius IX declared himself infallible. Infallible, that he makes no mistake. This is the concluding theoretical step in the centrifugal process that had been going on for many, many centuries. And what is more interesting but horrendous at the same time, it is retroactive. He said, I am infallible when I speak ex cathedra from the chair, and so have all the popes been all the way back, he says, all the way to Peter. All of the people back, they didn't realize it. They didn't know it. They denied it. Some of the popes denied that they were infallible. We'll see that also in a future podcast. They denied infallibility, but he says, no, they were infallible. Contradiction after contradiction. That's the Roman Church. The popes before were infallible. They didn't know it. They even argued against it. I ask your common sense, how could this possibly be? Some Catholics argued for the infallibility of councils. Others argued for the councils plus the general consensus of the Catholic Church. Others argued that these are legal scholars in the Roman Catholic Church argued that the Pope plus the council together would be infallible. But now Pius states, no, it was always in the Pope and only in the Pope. So, people denied it. Popes denied they were infallible. They said no infallibility is in the council. But now he says, no, y'all are wrong. I'm infallible, and so were you when you were denying those things. It just shows you the contradictions that they make. So the pronouncements always have been inspired according to Pius IX. So far back as Boniface III, which was really the first pope, he says he was inspired. Well, there's no clear dividing line through the years between the development of church authority as a religious institution and the development of the papacy as world sovereignty, but that's exactly what happened. They've come together, wedded themselves together, church and state. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, America was founded regarding separation of church and state, to use the words of Thomas Jefferson in his letter to the Danbury Baptists in 1803, separation of church and state. This is why the American institution stood against this, because of what had taken place in Europe under the papacy, This is exactly why America stands for a different type of government, not one that joins ecclesiasticalism with secular power. But that's exactly what the Roman Catholic Church is. One person wrote this: the frontier between ecclesiastical power and the secular power had changed from year to year according to the power of reigning popes. The pope played politics with princes and traded bishoprics as astutely as a modern baseball magnate trades good pitchers and batters. And that's exactly right. It's just a political organization. Here's something else interesting. Princes nominated popes, directed the policy sometimes. The popes for centuries accepted the right of princes to veto undesirable bishops. Why was that the case? How did that happen? If indeed Pius number 9 tells us they were always infallible, how is it that they allowed popes to be dictated or vetoed by secular power? The right of princes to do so. How did that happen? The Holy Roman Empire of the Middle Ages was exactly what its name implies: a church-state empire, Holy Roman Empire. And that was the case for many, many centuries. It was not until 1929 that the Vatican got back 108 acres of its former power and glory in the form of a new Vatican state by Benito Mussolini. And he represented the Italian government, giving it back to the Vatican. But that's another story for another day. But that's the evolution. We might even call it the devolution of papal power, how it has moved through the centuries and how the papacy has become a wedding of church and state, and so is antagonistic to the concept of American liberty and freedom. But more than that, it is unbiblical, unscriptural in every single sense.